I'm done with TYT. This is mostly about Jank and Anna. But of course, since like they're the people that are like the big names on the network and Jank kind of like owns the company, it's a pretty big deal when they do something like, I don't know, become incredibly transphobic and start what appears to be a ridiculous right-wing grift.
Is Ben Carollo person? Has me blocked. So they're definitely a bad person. Kinda not joking. So I'm not defending anything about them. I have no idea. They're a tanky? Yeah, that tracks. So I don't fantasize about like raping kulaks to death. So they probably wouldn't care for my political views either, you know? However, I'm interested in their perspective. Can we get their pronouns? Oh, she, her? Okay.
I may not be a doctor, but I like to think that in my master's degree in biotechnology and my experience literally being a trans person, who, by the way, most
How do you go from master's in biotech to TYT? Oh, shit. Do you think she manufactured the brain virus that infected Anna? Is this like a Yakub/white people thing?
Anna said this bit about doctors giving hormone therapy to children because they were afraid of being called transphobic. And I was very clear. I was like, you know that isn't happening? And Jank's response was, you know, I don't know. See, I could see it happening, though. And I'm like, no, but you couldn't. Because, you know, if that actually did happen, that would be medical malpractice, and it would be like a federal case to just give kids hormone replacement therapy because you didn't want to seem transphobic. That's ridiculous. But no, Jank still doubled down and was like, I don't know.
She is completely correct in the idea that doctors are absolutely not doing procedures because they're afraid of being called not woke or whatever. Like, doctors will turn down a hysterectomy because you don't have 5 kids and your husband hasn't come in and personally given his blessing for it. I don't think that doctors are out here performing bottom surgery on 4-year-olds because a mom with pink hair told them they'd cancel them on Twitter otherwise.
And to give you a sense of how unfair this is, that where she won in Canada with 275-pound bench press. I bench press 275. Okay, and that's not a big deal.
Do you? Jank, you're getting up there in years, man. Do you? I believe you used to. Do you still? I want to see that. I'm calling cap. I want to see that. I want to see a video.
For a guy.
This is so ridiculous. This is literally so ridiculous. Okay, think about this. He's like, oh, this trans woman won a competition where she broke a record bench pressing 275 pounds. And clearly, that's unfair. Because I, a cisgender man, can easily bench press 275 pounds. Therefore, there must be an advantage. And it's like, my guy, she literally broke a record. Like, what are you talking about? She clearly wasn't having like an incredibly easy time. You're stumbling so close to the point. Like, Jank is literally incapable in this moment of separating trans women from cisgender men in his own brain right here. Like, he is...
I do think that Jank is anti, like, trans participation in sports. I'm pretty sure that's the position he holds. The trans chick doing sports thing is complicated. From the research and opinions that I've seen, I still feel like, and this is just synthesizing a large amount of information that I've read, people disagree, it's an ongoing discussion. If you're a trans chick and you've been on hormones for 2 years, you're probably fine to compete with cis women. That's probably fine. It's complicated. I've gotten so many emails about it with like very, very specific info and this and that. But I really do think that seems to be the case. That's not necessarily fair for like trans chicks who have just transitioned because they'd have to wait 2 years. But like, you know, that's one of those unfairness of life things. I don't think you should be able to just day one of transition, I'm a woman now, watch me kick this ass, like kick everyone's ass. You know, I don't, you know, that's silly, but that's not really happening. Look around. How many trans athletes are there? Not many. Trans people generally don't want to do athletics. They want to code and suck dick. The idea that this is like a substantial, like we're talking like dozens, maybe a few hundred people across the United States. That's not, it's not a substantial enough, I just don't care.
But it's playing this game of, oh, I want to sound and seem really smart, regardless as to whether that not something is actually true. And so I'm going to say something that's not true, just because it's a big smart brain thing to say. You know, I think discriminating against trans people is okay as a smart galaxy brain strategic move, because we got to win over all of these people who just don't understand yet. Like, can we stop doing this? Can we stop playing this game of like, I really want to look smart, so I'm afraid of saying something that is literally true? Or like stand.
Well, I think this analysis, it lacks something, which is primarily that it's not just that the logic is bad, it's that the underlying facts that supply the logic are bad as well. For instance, you know, This is an extremely hot take, but I'll defend it. If I could magically know that giving up on the trans sports issue would then lead conservatives in America to just uncritically accept the rights of trans people and leave them alone, I would take that deal in a heartbeat. A few hundred trans athletes in exchange for the complete political safety of a class of millions? Oh, yeah, that's not fair. Those trans athletes should be able to compete and play fairly. But if that actually was the deal, then yeah, I'd take that in a heartbeat. That's not the deal, though. It's a fake deal. So it goes beyond just cruel utilitarian politics.
And also, wild concept, women with PCOS have a ton of advantages in sports. Are we going to discriminate against them too? Right? Once again, this is a failure to understand that trans people are just a type of person, right? This is thinking that transness is something extra, which is another vibe that I got with Jank over the phone, was just this feeling that it seemed like he thought that transitioning and being trans was like this extra special thing that people did for fun or to make a...
I agree with this. This is an interesting thought experiment, okay? So, would there be as much kerfuffle over the advantages that trans women have, the alleged advantages that trans women have in women's sports, if them being trans and them transitioning and all the advantages presumed thereof were genetically coded and innate, as opposed to something you choose to do? Transitioning is something you choose to do. Or to put it another way, if you took all of the imagined advantages of being a trans woman in women's sports, I say imagined for reason here, and those were just a condition that cis women could have, the same way that cis women can have gigantism or PCOS or hormonal imbalances or thyroid disorders. If they could have those advantages and it was just genetically locked, you guys know what I'm getting at, right? They would be allowed to compete. They would be allowed to. There's not really a precedent for, oh, this person has a genetic condition that makes them athletically better, therefore they shouldn't be able to compete. What? No, that's why they should be allowed to compete. Michael Phelps is half fish. The only reason people are concerned about the alleged advantages with transgender women in women's sports is because they think of transitioning as a choice that you can make in order to get an advantage over cisgender women. Of course, in reality, that's not happening. But it's interesting to think about that. Like, if you think of all the advantages, like, oh, well, some cis women have this condition where they have taller, lankier bodies, more muscle mass, Adam's apple, blah, blah, blah. It's from a hormone thing. Oh, wow, they must be really good at sports. If there were cis women that were born with that condition, you know what people would say? Wow, born athlete. But because it's being trans, as opposed to it just being a condition, it's subject to political discrimination. Just more evidence to the fact that this is all achingly arbitrary, unless they are black. Yes, there have been instances of discrimination based on higher levels of testosterone that have disproportionately affected women of color. I think that that's like broadly a race thing. Certainly it doesn't invite the same culture war discourse, but you know, whatever.
They tried anti-gay stuff, it didn't work. They tried trans bathrooms, you remember that? Mm-hmm. That didn't work. Kicking the transgender community out of the military, that didn't work. They drilled in until they finally found a little tiny nugget of like, hey, trans folks in like competitive sports seems a little bit much. And you don't engage them in that fight. They lose on everything else. But idiot activists, yes, I just called you an idiot. Activists go in there and go, no, I'm gonna fall right into that trap and I'm gonna fight on the only losing ground we have so we can elect more Republicans so they can pass more anti-LGBT laws.
This is just very naive political analysis from Cenk, leaving aside the fact that like, if they're attacking you on every trans-related issue, why would you believe that the trans athlete thing is like a sincere point that if they're allowed to have, they would stop at? This is like having 5 towns the enemy is attacking, and you beat them back away from 4 of them, and then you're going to try and defend the 5th town, which is a bit harder to defend, and there's like good people living there, and then your advisor is like, no, leave that be, because after they get the 5th town, they'll leave the other 4 alone, like they'll be done. If leaving a tiny town alone and leaving it to burn could end a war with like millions of people involved, then sure, okay, but it won't.
Great, well played. I'm sure your clout and your brand is doing great.
These clips are just so infuriating, genuinely. Like, that talk about betrayal is just so, like, pathetic and embarrassing and shameless, coming from Cenk and Anna right here. Like, oh, you're betraying the trans community by fighting for trans rights. How dare you just say that trans people should be treated equally in society? Don't you know that you're supposed to live as second-class citizens so that I can feel better about myself when I give you rights?
I don't think she's accurately identifying the specific type of brainworms Cenk is operating under here. Yeah, weak analysis, but, you know, whatever. Not everyone can be me. Also, she has me blocked on Twitter, so who cares?
And then, of course, she starts talking about, like, oh, puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for children. I think the important thing to understand here, and this is a line that I've, like, continuously told people and, like, said on TYT myself, that, like, really what it boils down to is hormone replacement therapy is literally just puberty. Like, at the end of the day, it's just puberty. And yeah, whether it's puberty with estrogen or testosterone, it's going to carry some risks, just like it does with cisgender children. That's just part of puberty. And it's actually not all that different if it's a trans puberty or a cis puberty, believe it or not. And so anybody fear-mongering about the effects are permanent, yeah, that's kind of the whole point, isn't it? You know? Isn't that like the whole point? But if the effects were really entirely permanent, then transitioning as an adult wouldn't really work, would it? And yet, of course, it does. And you know, it's funny because their biggest fear...
Is that true, Vaush? It's complicated. Basically, all the cells in your body have a big switch. It's like a big comedy power breaker switch that you see in cartoons. And it's the boy-girl switch. And depending on what hormones flood your body and at what time, the cell will flip the switch and behave differently. A lot of the stuff in our body, a lot of the growth that we experience during puberty is pre-coded biological changes that are determined by the activation code provided by the hormones that flood our bodies. I have giant, virile, overfull, rotund balls, which produce testosterone, and I'm simplifying it heavily. But that means that when I hit puberty, all of the little switches in my body got smacked right over into the mask bear bara category. But if you take hormone blockers, which would prevent that from happening, and then take estrogen, which would do the other switch, then yeah, you're basically just doing female puberty. There are some things that were predetermined before you were even born, like your genitals. But for other stuff, like breast growth, the way your bones develop, like the way your bone structure, you've probably seen young shits online. So a young shit is a bitter trans woman term for a trans girl who got to transition early and looks good. But you can see trans women who benefited from hormone blockers. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. They look like girls, guys. Y'all seen that, right? We literally went over that big Reuters article. If you've taken puberty blockers and then you take estrogen, like there's a huge difference, even in bone structure. A lot of stuff gets affected by hormones, you know? How to get over being jelly of that? Listen, you can be a beautiful woman even while being tall and having large hands too, okay? Don't freak out about it. Oh, the announcement of her leaving?
So unfortunately, Benny has decided to leave TYT. I am definitely heartbroken over her decision to do that.
That is like a me level misspeak right there. You know after that internally she was like, you know, she's like fuming. That was intent. No, I think that was an accident. I've misgendered people a few times, ectoplasm, but I generally default to they, even with people whose pronouns I know, even with cis people. I just say they a lot. I've always done that, even before like getting woke or whatever, usually just because it's a lot simpler unless you're referring to two different people. Is TYT live? Yeah, it's live, right? Don't they do live on their Facebook show and clips of it go on YouTube? Yeah, they can't like redo it or whatever. It's just an accident. It's just funny.
So no, yeah, I'm done with TYT because I can't let anybody think that I have any type of support for their opinions here because they're just ridiculous. And it's just gotta be too much for me to deal with all of this nonsense. And the last thing I want is for them to be able to say, oh no, it's fine. We have like a transgender host, so it's all good actually. Because no, it's not all good actually. It is in fact quite bad.
I think that it takes some backbone to quit over this. I think that's a respectable decision. Her desire to rape kulaks to death notwithstanding, I think that's admirable.